Okay, so this is going to be an annotation video for Ozymandias by Percy Shelley, and the best way to use this video will be to watch it, pause it as we're going through, pop your annotations on alongside, so you can kind of make notes and make sure that you understand, and you can rewind it if there's anything that you don't quite catch and things like that. So whenever we go through a poem, there are 5 steps we should go through. Read it first. Make sure that you can hear any patterns, that you're understanding the ideas, and maybe even just popping an annotation along the side so that you can see what is happening in each section. Then you'll go through and pick out your language, so picking out masts techniques, your metaphors, alliteration, adjectives, similes, triplets, and any sensory language. Then you'll go back through again and you're looking at structure, and this repetition is really important because it will help you to get familiar and to embed this poem and any poem into your mind. Thinking about the form, so for Ozymandias it is a sonnet. What particular formal structures do we see as a result of that? And then any context you can link it to. So we're going to start off just by doing the read through, and I'm just going to put notes along the side of what is happening at certain points within this poem. So it begins. I met a traveller from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So going through and doing the read, well, first of all, we have a persona, and this persona is telling us about somebody else, the traveller, who told them about what they had seen in the desert. So we've already got 2 different voices that we're hearing. Then we have what they actually saw. So they saw a statue that had fallen over. And that is basic, but that's what they saw. The characterisation of this statue, well, it's got a sneer of cold command. And then we have a third voice here, because on the pedestal we have this phrase from Ozymandias, okay? So we've got lots of layers of understanding. It's almost kind of second-hand, third-hand knowledge. And this is the only thing in the desert, so it is isolated. Nothing else is around it. It's boundless and bare, and the lone and level sands stretch far away. So if we have a look at those notes, we've got a persona who meets somebody, they find a statue that's fallen over and it's isolated. And the statue is of a king. Okay? So those are the basics. That's our first read. Now step 2 is to go through and look at some masts techniques. So in terms of the language that is used, well, this image straight away, the vast and trunkless legs of stone. Okay, so we've got this image of decay, okay, of something that is broken. And then later on this is contrasted because these words are spoken, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings, look on my works, ye mighty, in despair, by someone who had a frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command. Okay, so this is characterising him, and it's this here, the noun frown, this verb here, the wrinkled lip, or the adjective, sorry, the wrinkled lip, and then again this sneer. So we've got a semantic field of disdain, okay, of arrogance. They're looking down their nose at someone, or everyone actually in this case. Then we have quite a few examples of some sibilants, which is a form of alliteration. So the sculptor, those passions well read, which yet survive, stamped on lifeless things. And the only time you should talk about alliteration is if you have something to say. Now in this case, I would argue that actually the sibilance is important, because if you imagine being within a desert, that hissing sound, that soft S sound that is repeated could mimic the winds on the sand, okay, and it could also show that kind of atmosphere that is created around. So, and that sibilance continues throughout with colossal wreck, boundless and bare. So the sand stretched far away, that is something that flows throughout and therefore is worthy of comment. When you have this comment by Ozymandias, you've got direct address here. He's directly addressing everybody that sees his statue, and he is telling them to despair. So he is not a kind leader. This is somebody who rules through fear rather than through community-led ideas. We have a mimicking again in these first two lines, the vast and trunkless legs of stone. At the end we've got this colossal wreck. So again, our adjective here, we've got this semantic field of size that's showing just the scale of this ruler and his situation. And these ideas that it is boundless, it is unending isolation, which is ironic because in his life he was commanding people and he was in control. So language wise, those are just a few examples. You could pick out other things, words you might not know. The shattered visage, that just the face, okay, so that just means his face is shattered and on the floor. When you have the idea of a pedestal, that is the platform that the statue would have stood on. You've got this idea of a wreck, which is kind of like a shipwreck. Obviously it means that it's been shattered, it's ruined, and it's just left there. Boundless means no end. So if there is a poem that you're looking at and you don't understand a particular word, you should look it up. Until you get into the exam, there is nothing wrong with using the resources around you. So look it up, check and see what you can find, and annotate your poems and come back to them. See, a good way to use this as a revision resource would be to cover up your annotations and see how many of them you can remember what you had picked out. So then we're looking at structure and form. As I mentioned, Ozymandias is a sonnet, and sonnets have a few characteristics. So the first thing is that they have 14 lines, which you'll see this one does. The second is that they often have rhyming couplets, which again this one does. So we have land and sand, and then stone and frown, which is known as a half rhyme, but it's still there. Then we have the command, so again we've got another A, and then read and fed. Okay, we have the stamped on these lifeless things, which doesn't seem to fit in with anything else. And then we have appear and kings, we've got that return. Appear and despair, again we've got the half rhymes. And then we've got bear that would tie in with that, decay and away. So we've got this regularity of rhyme, but we don't have necessarily the pattern. But what we can see is that we have got this poem split into an octave, which is 8 lines. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've got an octave. Okay, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which obviously the 2, 6 and 8 add up to 14, is our sestet. So these are terms that are used when you're talking about a sonnet, and we've got these two distinct separate sections. Now actually, if we have a look at the content, in the first section we've got all of this comment between the persona, the person they're speaking to, and what they saw. In the sestet we've got the words of Ozymandias and the kind of culmination of what he said, and the irony of the comparison with the fact that he was telling people to despair, and yet he's all alone now, his words are meaningless, nobody even sees them. So structurally we've got that. We've also got lots of enjambment where it runs over lines, and then we've got these caesura as well. Okay, so if I just draw a line, and the reason that these are here is because the poem is in iambic pentameter, so there are 10 beats per line. I met a traveller from an antique land. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got that there. But to make it more naturalistic, to make it flow and sound as though the traveller and he are just speaking, I met a traveller from an antique land who said. we've got this pause here because the colon causes us to pause. 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Well, that's what was said. So this is making it more conversational. Then they continue. And anywhere that you have a caesura, you have this kind of end point, then you would pause when reading it. And so you get these patterns start to emerge. Finally, in terms of the context, which is the last thing we want to try to add on to our poem and to our analysis, well, there are a few things. The first one is Shelley himself. So he was a romantic poet. And the romantics, it's not to do with love. They were concerned with the relationship between man and nature, especially because they were writing during the time of the Industrial Revolution. So this idea of nature versus man is really evident in this poem. And actually, if we look at the effects of nature of time, well, these legs are now trunkless. It has destroyed this statue. Sands stretch far away, and this is just left in the middle. So actually, we've got this idea that nature is winning. Okay, that man and power are temporary, but nature is eternal. Okay, then we have the fact, so he's a romantic poet, so we can see these ideas and this kind of admiration for nature. What we also see, though, is these links to statues in the desert, and actually the antique land is likely to be Egypt. There is a suggestion that the statue which is being referred to here is that of Ramesses II. Okay, so there is a statue with a very similar inscription to the one that is ascribed here to Ozymandias. And so we can link that context to the pharaohs and to that situation that we see. So by looking at this poem, we've gone through and we've read it, we understand how it sounds, we've picked out the language which we've done in the pink pen. Structure and form are here in the blue. Okay, so it is a sonnet. I haven't written that down, let's write that down so we don't forget. Okay, so it's got 14 lines. It's got rhyme, and it's got the iambic pentameter. And then we have gone through and added some context. So as I said at the beginning, going back over it, pausing bits that you don't know that you weren't sure on, and any questions, ask your teacher.